Welcome to We Mean Business. I'm Steve Dorfman. Are you a mindful leader? And what does that even mean? You know, mindfulness is something that's been around for decades, but it's something that we're only recently hearing a lot about. And today's guest is Lowell Nerenberg. Lowell is a leadership and management coach who has a special focus on mindfulness. So we're going to learn all about mindfulness, what it means, and why it even matters. Welcome to the show, Lowell.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Thank you, Steve.
Who was it that brought mindfulness to the mainstream? How long ago was it? And how is it different from meditation?
Well, a bunch of good questions. I would say the one who made it most popular is someone named John Kabat-Zinn. Mm-hmm. And he's been on TV a lot lately, even though he did this many years ago. He brought forth...
He was recently interviewed by Oprah, wasn't he?
Yes. Yeah. And he was on 60 Minutes where he trained Anderson Cooper. So he's back in the news because he's credited with making it popular.
When was that?
That was, God, this was in the mid to late 80s.
Okay.
And the way I discovered him was I was in Chicago checking out of a bookstore, having too many books to read anyway, and then I came across this book, which was Wherever You Go, There You Are. I think something like that. Wherever you are, it was just like a crazy title. And it was all about mindfulness meditation. It was just really fascinating. And it got us started, got me started, and my wife. She bought his tape set, and
well, this was the 80s if it was a tape set.
It was. And she listened to it constantly, and she moved it around to all of our friends. And even she had a personalized license plate that said mindful, which I now have. I inherited that, and she went on to something else.
All right.
In any event, that's the way it started. And what it's about really is meditation, but meditation evolving into being present. Being mindful means being present in the moment, which in effect is not thinking about the past, not thinking about the future, just being aware of your thoughts, the people around you, what's happening around you in the present, focused on now.
So meditation is typically done with our eyes closed.
Yes.
Sounds like mindfulness happens eyes wide open.
Yes, and it can be with your eyes closed. Because sometimes I will eat a meal in silence and with my eyes closed. And being present to eating food with your eyes closed is a totally different experience. You actually feel the food in your mouth. You notice the chewing going on. Now, this will sound crazy to some people, but it's not crazy. It's a totally amazing experience. And what else happened was I ate less food when I ate mindfully with my eyes closed. So the distractions of the things that we see around us take our attention.
Yeah, I imagine, lots of folks are eating their meal in front of a television.
Yeah.
And that's, of course, the opposite of being mindful. It's kind of mindless eating.
Exactly.
And we end up eating a lot more. I mean, we could go through... My wife and I were sitting on the couch last night eating chocolate-covered pretzels, and I have no idea how many I had, but it was probably too many because the bag was there with us and we were on the couch. I don't think we'll do that again.
And you missed the great taste and crunch of chocolate-covered pretzels.
At least the good part of it, yeah.
Yeah.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
So, okay, so I want to just make this distinction and make sure
Sure.
everybody's clear on this distinction that mindfulness is not meditation. It may be a form of meditation, but mindfulness is something that we can practice in the moment. Like right now, you and I can both be mindful
Yes.
of this conversation that we're having,
Yes.
right?
But we're not meditating per se.
Mm-hmm.
Meditating is more like something we do. We'll take 5 or 20 minutes to sit quietly, usually eyes closed, thinking of a mantra or noticing our breath. And it's great training for being mindful, which is more like who you're being in the moment. You're being mindful, which is more aware of exactly what's happening now.
Yeah. And I guess the opposite of that would be sort of running on autopilot, which is something we'll address here. It's in here somewhere. It's in my questions because That's an important one. That's a big one.
Yeah.
Why do you think this practice has gotten so much recent attention? I mean, it's been around for a few decades, but I'm starting to see it. I mean, you Google mindfulness and all kinds of recent stuff pops up.
Well, when you Google mindfulness, you're Googling a company called Google, which is all about mindfulness these days. They have an exec there who wrote a book about it, and all the employees are going through this mindfulness training. Why? I think it's because this is a real information glut. Whereas back in the 90s, in my distribution company, we complained about there's so much information, I don't know how we're going to handle this. And now that was like chicken feed.
Yeah.
There's so many distractions, and all of us have a little bit of the ADD that people who actually have ADD or ADHD really have, but we have symptoms of it. So there's so many distractions, and we're not putting our attention on one thing at a time. Multitasking, for example, neuroscience now tells us you're really not multitasking. You're serially going from one topic to another, to another, to another.
Bouncing and hopping and chipping away.
Yeah, and each time you go back to a previous topic, you have to come up to speed again with where you were when you were there last time. Very inefficient.
So you're not being efficient or effective at all by trying to multitask. And I read recently that about 2% of the human population is able to multitask effectively.
Really?
So the rest of us are just
kidding
ourselves. Yeah, that much. So I imagine this takes great patience and also takes some practice. Where does one begin if they want to be mindful in what they do?
Good question. Well, I would start with practicing focusing, which is what you do when you meditate. You're focusing on, let's say, the breath going in and out of your nostrils, or focusing on the movement of your chest when you're breathing in and out, or you're focused on any number of things. But one thing at a time. It's you focus your attention on something. We're going to translate that eventually when we practice being mindful by focusing on now. What am I thinking now, for example? What am I judging now? What's on my mind? Or like when I played basketball as a kid, not like a star, just as a kid, the way we were aware of what was going on around us, the whole idea here is to focus our awareness on what's happening now. I would be covering you, for example, but I would spread my attention to the rest of the court so that I could see people coming from all sides and what was going on, because I may have to move over there. And right now I'm looking at you that way because I see a monitor out of my left side. I see a monitor up to the right of me, but I'm really focused on you, but my awareness is more global than that. So one can practice that by using your vision as one of your senses to be aware of. We have 5 regular senses. So there's, when you're eating, are you really tasting? When you're speaking, are you really noticing what's going on in your body? And you can. So a way to practice is, let's just practice being mindful, for example, one might say, and then I have my fingers touched together like this. I feel the seat beneath my butt. There are a lot of things I can bring my attention to right now that way. But what's most important is when we're with another person, especially in a business setting, where you're just with them and sort of turning off that judgmental mind we have and just being there, curious about the other person instead of judging them.
So it's about letting go of judgment, letting go of whatever other tangents might be sort of floating by. I know for me, that's one thing that I have to work on letting go of is somebody will say something in the conversation and I'll want to go on that tangent. Sometimes I'll catch it and stop myself because it's not really the point of what they're sharing.
Yes.
And it could derail the conversation. And I'll notice that and just sort of let it go. Would that be an example of?
It's a great example because here's what it is. When you're being mindful, you're just noticing things when you're doing it well. You're noticing, you're not judging. It's like, oh, damn, I shouldn't have done that. No, not that. Just notice, I'm over here. When somebody meditates, they're going to go off thinking about something and forget to count the breath, for example. And when you notice that, you don't, do your best not to criticize yourself and just say, I'm thinking. I'll go back to breathing.
So it's about noticing, not judging.
Right. Noticing without judgment is what you're looking for.
So sort of it is what it is.
Yeah.
Okay, good. You mentioned ADD earlier, and a lot of recent research shows that people in leadership positions and certainly entrepreneurs suffer from ADHD. Mm-hmm. So how is it more difficult for someone like that to build this mindfulness muscle?
Yes, and it's more important for them to build it.
And it is possible.
Yes, it is possible. It's just with anything that you want to make a habit, it requires that you practice. Mm-hmm. That's the bad news. But the more you practice, the more automatic it becomes. We're usually running on autopilot anyway. Most of the stuff we do during the day, we're not even thinking that we're doing it. We just move from one thing to another, from one thought to another, reactively. Mm-hmm. You say something that upsets me, I react to that. And so being mindful allows us to interrupt for a moment and be more present to this and choose perhaps a response rather than just react automatically like our unconscious mind would have us do.
So is this to say that if we are not being mindful,
yes,
that we're not necessarily being mindless, but we are running on autopilot?
Yeah, usually.
So most of us are usually on autopilot?
Yeah, only 95% of the time.
Only 95% of the time, yeah.
There's this other 5%. There's a part of our brain called the prefrontal cortex, sort of the thinking part, the one you listen to and you say, well, I need to do this right now because it's in my best interest to do that. But it's often trumped by your automaticity, by that reactive mind.
Do you know of any famous business leaders who are openly practicing mindfulness? Are you allowed to say who they are?
They've sworn me to secrecy. I wish I could say that, but I can't think of them right now. I would say probably most of them.
Most of them?
Yeah, well, here's the thing about it. People with ADHD generally have, which is and the part of it that's called executive function disorder, the part of the brain that helps them decide what to do next. They're usually pretty good at being creative and visionary, not so good at carrying out the doing part. It's the being part and the visioning part that they're good at, but following through on the doing part, that's why they need a staff to do the doing.
All right, we've got to take a break.
Sure.
When we come back, what I want to ask you about is, does this practice of mindfulness and all of this noticing, does it slow us down and make us less efficient, or is the opposite true?
Good question.
You're watching We Mean Business. I'm here with Lowell Nerenberg, leadership and management coach. We'll be back in seconds.
Everybody has a dream. Mine was to see the ocean. And with a little help, I made it.
Welcome back to We Mean Business. I'm Steve Dorfman, and today I'm here with Coach Lowell, and we're talking about mindfulness and how to be a mindful leader. So Lowell, my wife and I have a 1-year-old at home, and these experienced parents are all telling us the same thing. They're all saying, the time just flies by, right? That the nights, or that the days are long and the years are short. Right? They're all saying the same thing. So I wonder, is mindfulness sort of a way to crack the code on slowing down time? Does being mindful actually stop the clock or at least slow it down?
Good question. I would say yes. I would say yes, because here's a way to get into being mindful. when you notice that you're frazzled, or when you notice that you need to be different than you're being right now, the way to do, one way to approach that, a good way, is to take a deep breath and a deep exhale. It's a pause, that kind of a pause. I once had a Buddhist teacher that suggested it be called a sacred pause, which is a way I like to think of it, because it gives you an opportunity to reset and to choose how you're going to be right now. And when you choose to do that, things can slow down and you have an opportunity to choose what you're going to do next rather than scream or react in some other way. You get centered, you get your feet on the ground, so to speak, and you're more in control.
Now, because mindfulness requires patience and practice and thoughtfulness and sort of slowing down and all this noticing, can it then make us less effective or less efficient, or does it have the opposite effect on us?
It actually has the opposite effect. It has, well, I'm not sure which one we're talking about. I'll rephrase. It makes us more effective.
Okay.
Because we're more centered on that particular subject we want to apply ourselves to without the distraction of thinking about all the other stuff that's going on around us.
Now, some of our viewers might think, okay, I get that. I can see how it would make me more effective, but wouldn't I be more efficient if I was also thinking about what I need to be doing an hour from now, or reflecting on what happened yesterday, but also in the moment here with you?
I don't think so, because of this multitasking thing that people think is such a great idea. I'm really good at multitasking. No, you're not. You're probably not, because you're a little bit here and a little bit there. You don't get deep enough into any one thing for enough time to really apply any thought or creativity to it,
and
or solution.
And I imagine it's kind of a double whammy to actually believe that we are being more effective or efficient.
Yeah, I suggest that people try it. Try being mindful. Try stop what you're doing. Focus on the one thing. Focus your attention on what you intentionally want to put your attention on. It's a very powerful practice.
Well, I have to say, I'm approaching 90 interviews on We Mean Business.
Yeah.
And just by talking about mindfulness, I'm finding myself feeling more mindful about the interview. So there might be power just in the conversation. Right?
Yes. Now I have you just where I want you, Steve.
Am I being hypnotized right now? No, but it actually feels good. It feels calming and relaxing, and it feels good. It feels like we're in the moment of this interview, is almost as if the cameras aren't there.
Yeah. Good.
So I've read that mindfulness can increase memory and creativity.
I'll say yes to creativity, but at my age, what memory?
I thought you were going to say, what was that first part again?
Right. Close to that. Creativity for sure, because you just allow yourself. We used to have this expression in our business, we're sometimes working in the business, but when we take it outside of it and work on it, there's so much more creativity that enables you to be applied, rather than, because there's so much doing going on. It's this distinction between doing and being. It's one of the arguments I have with all this advice that we read about, which is this is what you need to do to be a good leader or to be a good manager. As a matter of fact, if you were to become, it's odd to say, to become a bit different in the way you are, you would be doing things coming from who you're being, calmer, more focused, and you'll choose to do things that are more effective because you're not harried, you're not rushing, you're focusing on, you're just being a more focused person in the moment.
Very good. How can a mindful leader best lead or manage a mindless employee?
Well, maybe the way we're having this conversation and it's having some effect on you.
So maybe just by starting by having the conversation about mindfulness.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, that's, or just my being a certain way with you creates kind of an energy that could transfer, that you can pick up on. That's what happens with people when they get in rapport with one another. It's something we can't see or don't know how it happened, but we're on the same wavelength. And so that would slow you down a bit. And we could have a conversation about the problem that we seem to be having once you're more centered and calm.
I imagine that the topic of mindfulness, or this practice of mindfulness, is the thing that many salespeople are lacking. They seem to be running so often on autopilot.
Yeah.
And not really noticing the body language of the buyer, not even maybe listening to what's being said. So, in essence, they're not really connecting with the other person. Right?
They're trying to think ahead. They're not being present.
Yeah.
If they listen closely to what the prospect is saying, they would hear something or see something or sense something that they wouldn't pick up because they're thinking ahead. What do I say next? What's the next trick, perhaps? The idea being that if they can just be present with the person and listen, there's a great effect of that. People love to be so-called gotten. They love to have somebody really interested in them. I heard this expression once before, which is concentrate more on being interested rather than being interesting. And you'll have stronger rapport. You'll get to know each other better. Your relationship will be deeper. And that's what we really want from people if you want to persuade them or if you just want to act in concert with them.
Do you believe that technology has made us less mindful? In other words, is technology a bad thing?
Well, I wouldn't say it's all bad, but it is a distraction. It makes some tasks easier, faster to get done. To have my calendar right with me on my smartphone is pretty cool. Then I don't have to look all over the place for my day timer. And there are a lot of distractions. I struggle with that myself, not looking at my smartphone, not looking at my email. I don't think I need to look at my email every 20 minutes, but I do. So, I'm a work in progress. We all are.
You once founded and led a $13 million Inc. 500 company that you since sold.
Yeah.
Were you practicing mindfulness at the time?
Not consciously, but I've been looking at this I've been meditating on and off since the early 70s. No, not really practicing much, but there were times when I realized that I just need to get centered. And I could have done better at that,
How can one create a more mindful organization? How can they bring this into their culture?
Good question. Good question, and a good thing to go for. First of all, as with most cultures, business cultures, it often starts with the chief executive, with the president, and who that person is, what their vision is, and what the core values are for that person and the company. If you look at a list of the core values if you make one of them to be mindful, to notice rather than judge, to notice and be curious before we judge, or to notice when we're judging, then the relationships that people have among themselves could be more honest. It's like, excuse me, I just thought that you were being a jerk, and that wasn't fair, because that was just my stuff. You might say that. It's a rare thing you hear in business, but when people are really being authentic and honest with one another, that could be something that comes up in the conversation and it clears the air really fast.
Wow.
The idea being you can trust one another more easily, because if I said, Steve, I don't think you're listening to me. You're right. I was off doing something else. Hang on just a second. So that you get centered and you listen. But if you're the boss, I don't know if I could say that to you if you didn't have that culture going on in the company.
Can you talk a little bit more about how being mindful is a way to let go of being judgmental and why that's important?
Yeah. When we're being judgmental with someone, we've already figured out what their motives are. Something happens, and we make up a story about why that person did that. There are certain facts. He said this to me. Oh, I know why he said that to me, because he's jealous of what I'm up to and what my job is, and he doesn't have this job, and I beat him out of the job. That may not have anything to do with why this guy said it.
A whole elaborate story we make up in our mind.
Yes. So that's a form of being judgmental.
Okay.
But when you're being mindful, that is, you want to be more aware, consciously aware of what's actually happening now, you could be aware that that's a story I just made up about him. What just happened actually? Oh, he said this thing, and I made it mean this whole story. So now I'm more mindful of my judgmentalness, and how I just applied my judgment to this, and that didn't serve us at all, nor me nor you. And I could say, hang on a second, why don't you tell me that again, because I just did something with what you said that didn't make any sense. What did you say? A, B, C. I got it. Okay. Now what?
That's really good. In the minute that remains...
1 minute? That's it?
1 minute, yeah.
I demand more time.
What is one thing that you hope our viewers will get from this interview? What's the one key takeaway?
Going to be two. First, it's
two.
to notice the potential value for us to be mindful, aware, and less judgmental of others. That may be three. But that's good enough. If you get that out of this and you try this and practice this, that's great.
Yeah.
I think you'll see value in it. Things will change in your life.
Yes. It certainly couldn't hurt.
Yeah.
You know, in the time that we've been talking about it even before the show, and when I'm actively, consciously practicing this mindfulness, it really does feel different. It feels great, actually. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's what Anderson Cooper said to John Kabat-Zinn.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, he said, now I'm a meditator. Or something like that. Now I'll be more mindful.
Thanks so much for being with us today, Lowell.
Thank you for having me.
So to learn more about Lowell Nerenberg, Coach Lowell, and the practice of mindfulness, you can visit wemeanbiz.tv. I'm Steve Dorfman. We'll catch you next time.